The following content is not suitable for all viewers. Discretion is strongly advised.
Hey guys, so this is the one. So if you're the squeamish type, or feel that you might be offended by stronger content, this one's not for you. As stated earlier, this video is not suitable for all viewers. Discretion is strongly advised.
Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Time for a special story that may leave your skin crawling. But if you're up to it, grab your vomit bags and get ready for a disturbance you didn't expect. I call this one, Dead Girls Shouldn't Have Sex.
There are some things we are told not to do for a reason. I myself have not taken certain warnings to heart, and now I may have started something to which there is no end, or at least no good one. Sure, some things we just know are inherently wrong, as we should not do them no matter what. Of course, in others, this spawns a desire, a satisfaction, or a pleasure that is gained through civil defiance. I am, of course, talking about a kink, or a fetish. What is my fetish, you ask, and how could it have such profound consequences? Well, if I were to just blurt it out, you'd likely be so repulsed you'd just shut down before taking in any other information. So, allow me to start at the beginning. And maybe I should get there fast. I'm not really sure how long you have left. Okay, so I work as a mortician. I never really was bothered by the sight, thought, whatever of dead people. If anything, I was always quite fascinated. As a child, if I were to come across a small dead animal, such as a bird or rodent, I would scoop it up and carry it away to my father's work shed. There, I would carefully dissect the animal in hopes of learning more about what exactly made them work. Of course, when my father first discovered this morbid hobby, I was scolded and taken for counseling. After a few sessions, the doctor informed my parents that my interest in death was quite natural and could possibly lead to a career someday, though my practices were encouraged to be a little more in the open, with proper containment of specimens, etc., so that I did not contract any diseases or the like. A career in my hobby? This thoroughly exhilarated me. Suddenly, my adolescence was filled with thoughts of a career in taxidermy. In school, I loved the class where you got to dissect frogs and fetal pigs. Sure, my classmates made fun of me and thought I was weird, but that's people, right? People always hate things that they fear, and always fear what they don't understand. Well, me, I've always been willing to make that leap, to not recoil in fear at the thought of the unknown, although maybe I should have. I think it was when I was working my way through college that I first noticed it. One of the cadavers brought in late in the evening had been sitting in an apartment for about 2 days before someone had found it. It wasn't that the thing was terribly aromatic, or that the stiff was anything more than a fat blob of flesh that used to be some overweight woman, but there was just something about that sour smell that piqued the interests of my brain and physiology. I peeled back the plastic cover to reveal the features of the pre-preserved body, revealing the naked blubber of the obese woman, and that tangy, distinct, yet subtle smell wafted past my nostrils, and for one reason or another, an erection soon followed. Now, although I do remember that incident clearly, I did nothing to entertain such a notion. In fact, at first, I wondered what kind of sick human being would even have such a desire, and I tried to push it to the recesses of my mind, hoping to ignore it as an uncomprehended, isolated incident. I learned a few years into my profession that this was no one-time occurrence. So, cutting to the chase, yes, I'm a necrophiliac. It's taken quite some time to even be able to admit this to myself, but the state of death is not repulsive to me, and once a soul or whatever has left a person's body, it's just unoccupied flesh, right? I'm not saying that it's right, but this is just how I've come to rationalize it. I mean, really, I have no idea why I find some corpses irresistible, and I'm sure it's because I have some sort of mental issue. But to me, from my perspective, it's not all that different than consensual sex. I will admit the sensation of cold flesh against my warm member was a bit disconcerting at first, but I got used to it. Besides, if you had seen firsthand the look of my first, all naked and exposed, you might just understand. The girl was gorgeous, even in death. Well, it was the one true downfall that begets us all in the end, that truly did me in. Falling in love. I'll never forget the first time I saw her. It was a Friday night, and I knew that because I always work late on Fridays to run inventory and catch up on any administrative paperwork. It was getting to be less Friday night and more early Saturday morning when the police had discovered and delivered the body of a 23-year-old woman living alone in her one-bedroom apartment. The detectives on scene, of course, wanted a cause of death as soon as I could get one to them, but did inform me that there were no signs of a struggle. No broken doors or windows, not even a mark on her body. The girl had been attending college at the local university and made sure to phone her parents each night before bed. When they did not receive a call for a few days, they called the local police, who, after knocking on the door, to which they got no answer, then resorted into looking in a window. There they saw the motionless body of the young woman, lying peacefully in her bed. I would later find out that she had a heart condition and suffered an infarction in her sleep. Tragic, really, at such a young age. But still, there wasn't a mark on her body, from what I could tell, but I had to wait until the police were gone from sight before I would be privy to inspect the rest of what I knew to be beautiful. Slowly, I methodically cut and removed the clothes from her naked form, and with each inch of flesh revealed, my excitement grew exponentially. The smell of her ripeness, her long golden hair, her pale, milky white skin, and those psionic lips. It was more than I could bear. Grabbing the protection I always keep with me in my wallet, I removed my pants and wrapped my Johnson, assured that I was totally alone. Of course, I shut off the lights, locked the doors before commencing the act, but I found myself in a near frenzy, sweating profusely as I pounded away at her cold, unmoving meat. Minutes later, I was done. Sure, the act never took long, but hey, dead girls don't complain, right? Okay, maybe that was in poor taste, but what about my fetish isn't? Now, typically, this is where I would prepare the body for embalming fluid and perform other such rituals, getting things prepared for the family and the funeral, but there was something about this girl. I just couldn't let her go. I did eventually embalm and preserve the body, but could not give it up. In the dead of night, The following night, actually, I moved her corpse, with the help of a dummy cart, to the back seat of my car so as to bring her home with me. The family, although the body was in immaculate condition, requested a closed casket. Some people, I guess, just can't handle seeing their loved ones without that light in their eyes, no matter how beautiful the corpse. But this was great news for me. I weighted the coffin with bound-up books and random materials, making sure they all weighed the exact same as her combined, and presented that to the family instead. Now, safely and securely, she was all mine. Once home, I finally had the leeway to do with her as I pleased, stocking up with one of those econo-packs of rubbers. Each and every night after work, I'd come home to a literal sex doll. Her parents, I learned, were devout Christians, and fully believed that her soul had departed from her body, headed for some great thereafter. Therefore, they shouldn't even be upset with what I was doing. Really, none of you should if you think about it. It's not like I was really hurting anyone, only having a bit of fun with my most cherished plaything, nothing more. But benign intent can sometimes have the most serious of consequences. On the third night, I noticed the very deep inside of my cold, pale friend was a bit more wet than usual. I figured that the flesh was finally starting to break down, despite the added preservatives. She was certainly beginning to smell like it, and I was fucking loving it. I pounded away harder, succumbing to the feel of overly wet, cold insides, the smell of slightly decomposing flesh, the whole goddamn experience. Shortly thereafter, I nutted deep inside. I pulled out, expecting to pull loose the wrapper from my phallus, but instead discovered the source of the extra sensation. My condom had broken. Now I was a bit terrified. What if I caught something? That night, that session, was probably the best sex I've ever had, but that was not overshadowed by a looming fear at some weird, incurable disease, one that may even point the finger at my extracurricular activities. Spending the night in worry, I decided to get myself checked out by a physician in the morning. Thankfully, the doctor said I was fine. Granted, I never actually told him what happened, but a clean bill of health is a clean bill of health. Okay, so there wasn't any time for things to fester and all that, and he still had a few more tests to run, but an initial check-over, and I was just fine. Thanking him, I asked him for a small note stating that I was there for work purposes. Hey, we all have our bosses. And I headed home. You might be wondering what I told him. Well, I basically described a hypothetical sequence of events that never took place, but was equally infectious and unhygienic. Masturbating in a construction site porta-john and accidentally making contact with the underside of the seat. Absurd, crass, and disgusting, yes, but also effective in covering up my actual motives for my visit. I mean, either act could end in a plethora of diseases, and this was the best non-illegal excuse that I could come up with. With a script for antibiotics, just to be sure, I left the clinic, headed for home. Upon arriving back home, the first thing I did was go and check on my playmate. If she had begun to decompose, as I suspected, then I needed to dispose of her ASAP. Creeping down the basement steps after turning on the light, her view came into my line of sight. There she was in all her naked splendor, splayed out and motionless on the long metal table. But something about her visage struck me as disturbing. Her form was bulged, larger in the center than usual. Her abdomen had become distended and swollen, so large, in fact, it seemed that she would burst at any moment. Now I was frantic. I had to get rid of her before her rank gave me up, and this became an even bigger problem. Things such as my career, my reputation as a citizen, my very life as I knew it was in jeopardy. I decided I would have to wait for nightfall to bring her to my place of work and use the crematorium. It was about 5:30 or so when I heard the doorbell ring. This was not the time for visitors. Hesitantly, looking through the peephole, I saw it to be Mike, one of my interns at the morgue. Not only was he a great worker, but he had actually become one of my good friends. Cracking the door a bit, I greeted him in my most sick-sounding voice, hoping to continue the ruse of a sick day. Mike said there were some invoices that I had to go over and practically let himself inside. Assured he wouldn't go anywhere near my basement, I allowed him access. Things were going just fine, perusing invoices and discussing the day, until the phone rang. Excusing myself from Mike, I answered the call, which happened to be the director. Now engrossed in conversation, Mike asked me a question about a drink or something. Without thinking, I hastily directed him towards the kitchen. Minutes passed, and I was about to get off the phone when I heard a commotion coming from below me in the basement. Rushing to get off the line, I wanted to figure out what it was before Mike decided to investigate for himself. But I was too late. The scene I walked into still stirs nightmares. The kitchen was now vacant, and the door to the cellar now wide open. Descending into the half-lit space, I instantly took in two sights. The first was what was left of my playmate. The bloated corpse on the table, which now resembled more of a gore pile rather than any semblance of a sexual object. Her abdomen looked as though it had finally burst, with intestines, other such organs, small amounts of blood, and embalming fluid now spilled forth from a large gaping hole of what was once her midsection. The second thing I saw was Mike, now on the floor, close to the stairs, switching focus between both the mass on the table and me. He was pale as a ghost and muttering fragmented, partial sentences, trying to gain understanding of what the fuck just happened. I started out with, "I can explain," but was interrupted by the gruesome tale of what he had apparently experienced. Mike, as I thought, had heard the same noise that I had and went to investigate. What he described was impossible. A depiction right out of some Ridley Scott film about some pale creature that emanated from the torn-out uterus of the body. The thing was small, fleshy, had no eyes, and only one orifice, lined with teeth and a protruding, meaty red tongue in the center. Mike said that before he could react, the thing jumped at his leg and bit first, his one hand holding his leg before I followed the other, which was now raised, pointing right up at the broken window. Now, this is when Mike began with all the "what the fuck" questions. So, what else was I supposed to do? I had to do it. And before I gave him an explanation, I cracked Mike's head open with a shovel that I had grabbed nearby, where I keep most of my gardening equipment. I tried to fix everything, to keep it quiet, but I was too late. It's been 3 days since then. I have since removed the girl's body from my home. I tried to get rid of Mike's as well, but it seems he won't stay dead. Mike's been lumbering around the basement, groaning what sounds like a mix of pain and despair, and he keeps looking at me like he's hungry. My basement windows are now boarded over, and my basement remains padlocked. I never did find that creature, that thing my sex doll and I spawned. But I've heard all kinds of reports on the news. Seems a strange creature has been sighted, accompanied by a new flu or other such viral pandemic that scientists have yet to truly identify, making people very sick and eventually succumbing them to death. Stories of people eating other people's faces. Sure, cops say it's related to a return of unregulated bath salts on the underground market. But I know the truth. And now, you know the truth too. The end is certainly coming. And it's all my fault.
Well, if that didn't turn you off for the foreseeable future, I don't know what will. Either that, or seek professional help. But keep track of this horror professional as I keep delivering the fear. And remember, the next time she gives you head, make sure she lets you keep it.